Hey, this is really an honor. First off, I'm very impressed. If you have an event in Los Angeles and there's homelessness in the title, it guarantees ghost town. So that you would all come out for something that's cause-driven means a lot about the community and the social media club. Seattle is kind of where this all started. Yes, I started in LA, but I've been going down memory lane a little bit, trying to, get some introspection on what works, what doesn't work, how it all happened. And this is my first visit here, and I don't know if you remember the app Whirl. I was actually trying to find this, they had an event where the United Way and some other people were here. So just to give you a backstory, I was 19 months unemployed, crashing and burning, really dark time. I started Invisible People. I'm out doing my thing, and I'm using Whirl. So they flew me in to Seattle because they had no idea about causes using their app. And I met with their developers, and they had a little tweet up, and Chris Perillo was there. And Chris says, the iPhone 3G just came out with videos. You got to have video. And so he got me an iPhone. And so I should have known, here it is, a senior vice president and a marketing person in a tent city in Seattle. And, this was 4 years ago. And that's actually what I've been doing, is connecting the technology world, the social media world, with homelessness. And back then I didn't see it, but that's really what's happening. So Chris asked me to speak at Gnomedex. I didn't even know what a Gnomedex was. And the first year I was doing a road trip. I parked in North Carolina, and I flew up, and that's me taking a picture. It's one of the 3 standing ovations, I think, probably one of the only standing ovation I'll probably ever get. But what was really neat, and CNN documented, is I got the word homeless to trend on Twitter. Now, Michael Jackson trends on Twitter. iPhone 17D trends on Twitter. You know what I mean? Homelessness doesn't. What was also cool, and it shows the Seattle community and Chris Perillo's community, the Gnomedex community, is while I was speaking, they passed a hat and raised $1,800 for Nicholsville. And that's just truly amazing. So how many of you have said you're going to do something or never going to do something and you end up doing it? Yeah, about 100%. Well, I hate to drive. I once drove from LA to St. Louis, and I said, I'm never going to do this again. So in 2009, and this is actually, I parked in Greensboro and flew to Seattle for Gnomedex, but I did 11,363 miles in 2009. I said I'd never do that again. And in 2010, I did about 13,000 miles, and I said I would never do that again. And in 2011, the Canadian government actually commissioned me to go to 24 cities in Canada. So I used the Twitter tag, My Butt Hurts. And I drove from LA to 24 cities in Canada and then back to LA. So I also said I'd never Twitter. And pretty much, you take a photo of me, I'm looking at a phone. And I thought it was dumb. I'm never going to Twitter. And almost every photo that's actually the LA Times. So when I get the big hits, I'm looking at my phone. I also said I'd never be homeless. I am very lucky that when I was going through my knucklehead adolescence craziness, that every cell phone didn't have a camera. So that is the closest photo to my own homelessness. And just to give you a little background, before that, I had a great job in the television industry doing syndication. I did Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, Married with Children, 21 Jump Street, St. Elsewhere. Some of you might not even know the shows. It's the manufacturing end of TV. I never met Vanna White, but I'm the guy that got Wheel of Fortune to your TV set from 1990 to 1994. In 1995, I ended up homeless, selling pictures of my iguana to tourists on Hollywood Boulevard. We have a problem, and I, as a media guy, a TV guy, I think this photo really says it all, because we see it there. You see the people outside. You know of homelessness. But there's something grabbing us away. We want to stop and say, what's the story? Why is this person there? What's your story? How can we help? But whether we're busy or social norms, or we just don't have enough energy to feel somebody else's pain for a day, we keep on walking. We get pulled away. So this is Fashion Week in New York. And again, this is, the other thing that's happening is we're almost becoming anesthetized to it. We see the homelessness, and it's almost like, oh, we can't do nothing. It's meant to be. It's homelessness. So when you see, this is what the media portrays. When you see homelessness like this, what do you think? Please be honest. I was speaking at church. They said, dirty, mental illness, drug addict. What do you think? Yell it out. Okay? Alcohol? Mental issues? Anybody else? All great? Vietnam vet? Anything else? Because this is what the media, pretty much this is what is reinforced, is what homelessness is. Okay, why is somebody homeless? All great stuff. So now this is what nonprofits show. Now this is actually an older woman that I helped get into housing. So we always present trophies. Look, we've solved homelessness. And most of general population have gotten their information about homelessness from the marketing materials from the Salvation Army and Union Rescue Mission and all these other places. And, that's the other side of the wrong education. And the government does this. They throw numbers at us. But is that really homelessness? Randy has been looking for work for 4 years. Dale did 2 tours of Vietnam. When I met him, he said all the VA can get him is coffee and donuts. Rashid was at the World Trade Center at 9:38 in the morning of 9/11. He spent 4 years in construction helping clean it up, developed health issues, lost his job, lost his apartment, lives in a park in New York. Dale is an engineer. A drunk driver killed his wife and his daughter. He went on a binge that took him to homelessness. When I met him in Tampa, there was no support for him to get his life back. She lives in her car with her 4 kids. She lives next to her car because in most communities in America, it's actually illegal to sleep in your car. So she puts out a sleeping bag and a blanket next to her car because she's been arrested once. But this is homelessness, and I agree. This is so great because at Nomedex, I learned about that other audience called the internet, because the average age of a homeless person, a study done by the National Coalition to End Homelessness back in 2007, states the average age of a homeless person is 9 years old. So at Nomedex, somebody looked it up online, and they found a New York Times article that argued the math. Okay, so the average age of a homeless person is a young child or a teenager. Does that make it any better? So let's be real. The data when it comes from homelessness, when the government or a nonprofit gives you data, it's immediately off because parents don't raise their hands to say, take our kids away. And we're human. We don't want to say we're different. I'm homeless. I'm different than you. And so the numbers are completely skewed, and this is before the recession. But this is the homeless. There's some people here from the YWCA and some other people here that work with family homelessness. And they'll tell you, you see this guy with the cardboard sign on the street corner, that's about 20% or 40% of homelessness. There's another 60% of homelessness that you don't see, that are living in hotels and cars and vans and just in some really horrible situations. These are all kids that I've helped try to get out of different emergency shelter situations. This is my favorite photo of a homeless family that I've ever taken. I was watching this dad carry his kid all morning long. And I'm going to walk off this thing, and that will make a great YouTube video. He was carrying his kid all day, not, just to love, not letting him touch the ground. I can't imagine raising kids in a homeless shelter. So I was in Nevada Partnership of Homeless Youth, and I asked them, I said, what's your biggest problem? And they said, families downsizing. I'm like, what? Families downsizing? What's that? Well, Nevada is the number 2 hotspot. Number 1 is Los Angeles. Number 2 is Nevada. It got really hit hard with the economic crash. So a lot of bankruptcies, a lot of foreclosures. So people are losing their 3-bedroom house and moving into a 1-bedroom apartment and kicking out their oldest kids. Can you imagine that conversation? It really didn't get to me until I was in Detroit and I met her in a homeless shelter and her mom just dropped her off. This is Sergey. It's his 18th birthday and his first night homelessness. So there's a woman, and I met her under a bridge in Atlanta, and she completely changed my life. And I'm going to play you that short video.
Angela, we're here in Atlanta, Georgia, under a bridge. You're living out here homeless. What's it like?
Not good, but I'm surviving. I'm living.
How do you survive?
I believe in God.
God takes care of you?
Yep.
How long have you been under this bridge?
I'm not sure.
How do you occupy a day?
Go to church.
You go to church. What else?
I pray.
What's your future like?
I'll have somewhere to stay soon.
If you had 3 wishes, what would they be?
Good question. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. Well, thank you very much for talking to me.
You're welcome. Y'all have a good day.
You too, Angela.
So how Angela changed me was actually behind the scenes. So up until this point, I thought whatever it is you could do, let's say if all you could do is bake chocolate chip cookies. Well, bake chocolate chip cookies and go hand them out. I thought at least you were doing something. Well, I was with a church group, and I asked them, because you don't have to be a doctor or an expert in social services to know Angela's dying under that bridge. She's vulnerable. So I said, what are you doing for her? And they said, we're bringing her sandwiches. And it was that point that I realized sandwiches are not enough. It's housing, jobs, and health services. Housing, jobs, and health services, and housing, jobs, and health services. So let's say your support level is just baking chocolate chip cookies. Well, bake your chocolate chip cookies, but take them down to the Union Gospel Mission or someplace and work as a team to help end homelessness. So remember Rashid earlier at the World Trade Center at Tompkins Square Park? I was there 2 hours. 5 different churches came and fed the same people. The Bowery Rescue Mission is right down the street. Same Jesus. Take your food from the park and take it to the Bowery Rescue Mission, and they can now save their lunch budget and spend on housing, jobs, and health services. Because there's 2 things that happen. We're either maintaining homelessness or we're ending homelessness. And just feeding people randomly is maintaining homelessness. If you're feeding people to build a relationship to get them out of the park, that's okay. So one of the questions I get a lot is, do you know how Angela got under that bridge and what's her story? And I don't, but this short cartoon might be able to give some insight.
Elizabeth was born on a Monday in the early morning hours. Her parents nicknamed her Beth and loved her more than life. Beth always knew she would be a famous artist and the entire world would love and adore her. Then one day, something terrible happened to Beth's mom and dad, and Beth never saw them again. She was shuffled from house to house and school to school, never attached to anything or anyone. When Beth was 17, she got a job in a small apartment she could barely afford. She took the bus to work and every night would head home alone to her little apartment to paint until late into the night. One morning, Beth woke up and she was very sick. Beth finally saw a doctor who prescribed her some medicine. It was very expensive. Beth searched for a job closer to her apartment, but there were none to be found. She started selling her belongings, even her mother's jewelry. But the bills piled up and up and up. Beth lost her phone, her lights, her heat, and eventually her home. She asked for work, she asked for money. Then one day, she stopped asking for anything.
So there's another part of my story. It took several years, but I rebuilt my life from being homeless on Hollywood Boulevard back to a 3-bedroom house, new car in the garage, pool in the backyard, diesel jeans, tag watches, back making 6 figures, working in marketing, success on the horizon, and the economy tanked. So I lost a job, lost another job, lost the house, and all I had was a backpack full of socks, and a camera and an iPhone and Twitter. So I took $45 and I hacked out the header on a WordPress theme because I'm not a graphics person. I couldn't afford a graphics person, but I know enough HTML to be dangerous, and hacked out the header. And this was the first Invisible People. So I started traveling and empowering homeless people to tell their own stories. And I started getting little glimpses, little nuggets that I was on the right path, because even today it seems a little weird. But this is from America's Next Top Model. So here this woman writes, or this kid writes, I was taught to call homeless people bums, to be ignored of them. Because of Invisible People, I've learned they're like everyone else, and they need help, not to be ignored. Those were the little nuggets that I was on a path that's actually changing people's paradigms. So this is Los Angeles Fire Department. If you look at their Flickr stream, which I recommend because they do social media so well, these guys are not just getting cats out of trees. Mark, you humble us to the point our eyes leak. You're among the greatest examples that any of us could follow. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I'm trying to show influence, because all I had was $45, backpack, Twitter. And you guys have a lot more resources than I do. So whatever it is, save the whales or the environment, human trafficking, pick a cause, and let's change the world, because you can. One person can make a difference. That's Nancy Pelosi. She was Speaker of the House. This is Bentonville, home of Walmart. And I was photoshopped on the cover. Now, homelessness isn't sexy unless it's Thanksgiving. So again, here I am, fat old guy, $45, bag of socks, Twitter, and I'm being photoshopped with the Speaker of the House in Bentonville. Ford Motor Company, my iPhone sunk to the Ford Motor Company for 2 years. So they picked up the RSS feed for both my YouTube and my Flickr account. So you'll even see Rashid's video is on the Ford Motor Company website. Nobody's done that. Salvation Army, United Way, you know what I mean? If you're a brand or whatever, wouldn't you like to have, a major motor company, car company talking about you? This is the page today. You can actually look it up. Ironically, that's Nicholsville. It's a story from Nicholsville that's still on the Ford website from my first trip here. That was because of Gnomedex. GMC lent me a car in 2011, did this big thing in Chicago at SobCon. Murphy Oil gave me a year's worth of gas. We did all these branded events that were really cool. I would, like for here, this is Pittsburgh, so the dealer would have raffle off Pittsburgh Steeler tickets if you bring in a donation. And then they fill up a truck in the lobby, and then I would show up and drive the truck full to the homeless shelter. And actually, who got the most benefit was the employees. Because employees, whenever you're doing a cause marketing thing, and cause marketing is big, you can't measure what impact it has on the employees, but it's one of the best reasons to do cause campaigns. Hanes, I've now worked with Hanes. 3 years ago, Hanes gave me socks so I would shut up and go away. Now we've worked with the Salvation Army and distributed probably 2 million pairs of socks to homeless people around the U.S. Kenneth Cole has used my videos. Tyson Food has used my videos. On August 26th, 2010, YouTube gave me their homepage for a day, for 24 hours. 1.6 million people who would have never rolled down their window at an exit ramp and asked a homeless person their story had a positive interaction with homeless person. I used to think you couldn't buy that. And I was speaking in Portland 2 weeks ago, and somebody says it's $500,000, which makes sense. Everything has got a price tag. But it's just amazing that YouTube would give me their homepage for a day. So Google's blogged about me a couple times. That's almost as good as being in the Bible. They did a thing with President Obama, the State of Union, in 2011, and they contacted me and they said, would you record some homeless videos for President Obama? And of course I said yes. What was really, really cool about it is it wasn't brought to you by Invisible People or Google. They really, really wanted people in poverty to have a voice, and I have a lot of respect for them to do that. Gates Foundation, this is, I presented there today. They blogged about me about a year ago. You know, they're like the leaders in philanthropy. This is, to me, like getting the Academy Award, saying, you know, job well done. Remember how I said I'd never Twitter? That's me speaking at Twitter. That's the, I'm the first cause to ever be asked to speak at Twitter Inc. But this is the stuff I love. I'm in Baton Rouge, and a tugboat operator says, we got 50 homeless kids that don't have shoes, and within an hour in social media, they all had brand new shoes. This is Don. Don is the first person actually housed because of Invisible People. There was several housing programs have been created by now, but Don was the actual first person. Him and his daughter were giving housed because of my work. This is David. David was a sportscaster, ended up on the street, and at an event just like this, often a lot of homeless people will show up. Carrie Fuller is a homeless mom. She was having trouble parking. She didn't show up. But so David showed up, and somebody just started talking to him, took him to breakfast the next day, helped him get a job, and then help them find a place. So I'm not saying go befriend your local homeless person, and don't ignore them, yes, but you know, I'm showing this to show that just one person in a relationship can make a difference. A farmer donated 40 acres of land that's now being used to feed 150 people a week. And again, $45, bag of socks, I'm loud and pushy, that works great on Twitter, and a camera. So what's really cool is these are kids from a homeless shelter that actually work on the farm every day. Donnie, and this is, again, the power of, I mean, we always talk about social networks as Twitter and Instagram and all that. YouTube is a social network, and this is a test to the power of YouTube, is Donnie was on the streets of Calgary, Canada, for 21 years. It was so cold this night. I almost didn't walk down the alley. I was with an outreach team, and I almost begged them to take me. I'm from Los Angeles, you know, give me a little grace, but I almost begged them to take me back to the car. And Donnie was there, and I put his video up, and the Calgary community saw the video, and they said, not in our hometown. And they went and found him and got him into housing. It was truly amazing. And then when I did the Canadian road trip, I stopped by. I just heard his cat had kittens. So again, this is really because of YouTube. So this is Terry Pettigrew. Terry Pettigrew in this photo was 58 years old. He had been homeless since 8 years old. This is also in Calgary, and he's dying of cancer. He had stage 4 cancer. So, like, even now, I'm unemployed without income. At that, when I do this, it doesn't make sense, and I'm broke, and I'm wah. And he's encouraging me, and he's dying of cancer. He's, telling me these great grandfather type stories. And so sometimes it takes me a couple of days, weeks, months to get up a video. But I was compelled to tell that video, to get his story up that night. And the Calgary newspaper actually took that video and put it on their homepage. And his brother that he hadn't seen in 33 years saw the video. And Terry had 56 days with family before he died. I actually dedicated the Canadian road trip to him and stopped by and had a meal with the brother and his wife. It was truly in Moose Jaw, Canada, I think it was. They gave me all these little moose trinkets. Yeah. 2 colleges in Canada are actually giving full ride scholarships to homeless people because of my work. I said the Canadian road trip. Well, they're pretty smart. They commissioned me to go to 24 cities where we put political pressure on 24 mayors to create the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. And at the very end, there was a homeless youth that showed up to hear me speak. And the mayor of Newfoundland, St. John's, Newfoundland, actually invited him into the proceedings when the proclamation was signed. And to me, that was just so great that he would invite a homeless person in, because you'll see in a moment, most of my work is about empowering homeless people to have their own voice. So recently, we had Hurricane Sandy in New York City. You could have the winning lottery numbers, and you ain't getting a generator in New York City after Hurricane Sandy. And it was, a crisis. The New York City Rescue Mission, Bowery Rescue Mission, if they didn't get power, they were going to have some serious issues with sewage and some other things. So I'm in LA, and these are all people I don't really know. But I was able to get 3 generators and 4 pallets of food from Syracuse, New York, down to the outskirts of Manhattan. Then we ran into another challenge. You couldn't get into Manhattan. So then I found another group that had a truck that went and met them, and they were able to exchange it, and we were able to get several rescue missions in the city, food and generators. So, and even the little stuff. There's a comedian that tweeted out that he had 75 pounds of frozen fish sticks, and he says, "Not joking." And then somebody brought it to my attention, and I went and picked him up and gave him to a homeless shelter. But I use this as a little bit of a transition. I like to say it like this. One of the stereotypes people are like, how do they have a cell phone, or how do they get online? Well, if you're going to be homeless tomorrow, what 2 things would you take with you? Your laptop and your cell phone. I mean, come on. How can you expect people to even better their lives without a cell phone or some way to connect? So this is a mom doing what I call a Hail Mary. So, she's tweeting out, she's about ready to be homeless, and she's tweeting out to Barack Obama and Michelle Obama and a couple other organizations, desperate for help. See, nonprofits, we're online, but we're doing our thing saying, look at me, give us money, look at me, give us money, look at me, give us money, look at me, give us money. That's what nonprofits do. Our web pages are all donor-centric, or we might, clap say, look at our board of directors. But that homeless mom, she's online, she's looking for help, but we're not there. We're not there to help them, and we need to be. And that's for whatever if you're running a business here, your clients and your customers are online. It's the same in homeless services. People are online, and they're looking for help, and we need to be there. So I created something called wearevisible.com, which actually is little cartoons on how to get on Twitter and Gmail and everything else. And it has actually taken a couple of years, and I just worked a deal with a company where I'm creating a Facebook for homeless people. So I originally created it on Facebook, and there's about 1,000 single moms living in homeless shelters, maybe more, but because they're connected to other people, social norms, again, we don't raise our hand and say, we're different. So that the gorgeous conversations never took place. So just a real brief background, when I started, I thought homeless people, let's say you're in Phoenix and you say, I'm hungry, and homeless services would say, we feed at 5, come on over. Well, that never happened, but what happened was there's like homeless people helping other homeless people over Twitter and Facebook. And it just became gorgeous. So We Are Visible in June, July at the latest is going to morph into basically a peer-to-peer support network online, trying to create the need and justification and prove case studies for virtual case management. So this is RD, and I was on a road trip. RD found out she was homeless. I asked what her story is. She says, my story, born, school, work, never fit, 9 to 5, health issues, homeless in 2 days, passion to make a difference, still smiling. So she, virtual case management, I won't read the whole thing, but in the middle she says, then 4 days before I was to hit the streets after I'd given away every one of my belongings, I ran into a Twitter conversation with Hardly Normal. Thanks to his guidance, I have a safe shelter for a while. So, I can go to Expedia or Travelocity or Kayak and rent a hotel anywhere in the world, but a homeless person can't. They have to go physically to the place and sit there like you're getting your teeth pulled for 5 or 6 hours. If you're lucky, you get maybe a bus token and put on a waiting list just to do it again, The technology is there. We have the technology to solve all this so that it's called the continuum of care, and the continuum of care all talks to each other. However, we need a cultural change, and that's a whole different conversation. So RD, we spoke at Jeff Pulver's 140 conference, and I have a habit of bringing homeless people up on stage with me, which is how the word homeless trended on Twitter, and I kind of worked that one a little bit. And because this is RD signing a lease again over Twitter, we were able to get her social media into housing. This is a veteran in Carson City. He actually started recycling, becoming an evangelist. He's handing out We Are Visible cards and socks. And this is him. Now, that's Kiefer on the side, at the time a 14-year-old homeless boy. And they live in this RV that doesn't have any water, it doesn't have bathrooms. I mean, it's homeless. This is the hidden homeless that you don't see. So how many know what a PSP is? It's a little portable video game, but it doesn't really have a keyboard. It has that Netflix type thing that you got to do this and drives you to drink, or smoke or something, So he bootlegged Wi-Fi off one of the neighbors, but he can't really, type more than a couple of characters. So he'd get on my Facebook page and he'd say, hi, hugs. And I'm like, man, it's a 14-year-old homeless kid. I'm not like a homeless youth guy, I'm not like a kid guy. Gosh, I got to help him. I don't know what to do. So his mom told me that he took my profile photo off Facebook and he replaced Tony Hawk's on the PSP. Now, I'm cool, but I ain't Tony Hawk cool. I mean, So I had to go meet him. I raised the money, and I flew, and I took him out to dinner. They hadn't been out to dinner for a while. This is his first time ever having Baskin-Robbins. Personally, I think chocolate ice cream and housing should be a right. Can I get an amen? There we go. And so he responded, thank you for everything last night, the best night of my life, hugs. What's really cool about it is Mr. Tony Hawk got word of it. Says, what's up, keeper? Please DM me your clothing and shoe size and address, and I will send you some stuff. So if you're a homeless kid, you ain't cool. They know who you are. You're wearing the same clothes every day. That's the homeless kid. You know what I mean? You just ain't cool. So then he comes in and says, I'm DMing with Tony Hawk. They're like, yeah, right. Sure you are. Then he comes in with an autographed skateboard. Mom hated it. I thought it was pretty cool. Tony Hawk hoodie and Tony Hawk clothes. And, it's just really, really, really awesome. So I always end with Joseph. And I ended Nomedex with Joseph. And I'm going to actually tell you why. And I don't normally, Joseph died. And he had no next of kin. So in Los Angeles, if you die and you're homeless, they save your remains and they put you in an unmarked grave with all the rest of the homeless people that died. So I end every presentation so Joseph is remembered. So it's not that I'm not creative enough to come up with another ending. It's my way of keeping Joseph to have his life memorialized. So Joseph, when he came to us, had maggots in his leg. And he had been homeless for 13 years. And I got this weird thing. I mean, I don't do it as a job or whatever, but hospitals are lonely, and whenever I hear about a homeless person in the hospital, I go visit them as often as possible. So I'm telling him, I didn't think he was going to make it, you know, I mean, as far as housing or anything. So I was saying, Joseph, man, you got I Love Lucy reruns, you got food, you know, you got heat, you got all this stuff, man. Stay here, milk it, you know, cry, say you got appendicitis or something, you know what I mean? So a coworker was able to find a loophole in a grant, and we were able to actually get him housing. And that's his first steak in 13 years. So look at that smile. A couple weeks later, I took him out to eat to Bob's Big Boy, and I asked him to smile for me, and he said no. I said, why? He says, because you're not buying me steak. So that's pretty much it. If you go to invisiblepeople.tv/@home, some really crazy people actually rode around with me in the 2010 road trip, and a feature movie will be released next year, along with a smartphone game that is really cool. You actually play it in a hyper-local situation. How it works is you'll have your group of people, and you have your smartphone, and the GPS will say, oh, we're here, and then a homeless person will pop up on your screen, and then you help them. And as you help them, let's say they need a blanket, and you buy them a virtual blanket, a real blanket will be given to a homeless person. So that's the smartphone game that's coming up with a whole campaign to what I like to call, say, in 2014, we're going to punch homelessness in the throat. And invisiblepeople.tv/home is a bunch of preview clips. There's some great clips that really prove we can end homelessness, because we really can end homelessness. So thank you all. It was fun.
Thank you, Mark. Don't go anywhere. Mark? We're not done and they're not done.
Okay.
I'm sure the audience has a bunch of questions, and I was back in the back telling Shauna, like, you know, this is one of the hardest things when a speaker gives such a moving presentation like you did, for me to come up and I'm going to say pull questions out of the audience, and I'll put that in quotes because I don't think it's going to be difficult. But do you mind taking a couple of questions?
Please.
The only rule is because of the live stream, if you have a question, make sure I bring the mic to you. But raise your hand. Let's get some questions going here. I want to ask a question. How does one end up with 75 pounds of fish sticks?
Follow a comedian in Los Angeles.
So somebody just decided it would be funny to send the comedian 75 pounds?
No, his wife actually does a food show, and you know how sponsors will send you stuff all the time, and somehow they had sent her all these fish sticks.
Because the food company is thinking that this guy and his wife can use 75 pounds of fish sticks, but good on him to putting them to good use. Go ahead. Are you okay? You good?
I don't know. It's a good question. I haven't known that for a long time.
I kind of feel like you're good, but I kind of wonder whether it's like...
Well, you know, I talked about this with the Gates Foundation, and we talked about it with a few people earlier here, is what I do has not really been accepted by the traditional funders of homeless service. So, and awareness is the hardest thing to fund. Now, if you really look at it, with $45 a laptop, a bag of socks, I've done more than all their multi-million-dollar marketing campaigns together. Because one, I'm talking to new people. I'm talking to different stakeholders. And two, there's literally inspired people to action. And just so you know where we want to go, is first we have to scale me out of it, and we want to start building local chapters. Because, for example, here I'm in Seattle, and people are inspired by a video, and they say, well, what do you do? Well, I know Union Gospel Mission here, and I know some connections, but I don't really know what's going on. But a Seattle chapter of Invisible People would be a two-way conduit. But, you know, I do this, I did all that while being unemployed, while working at a homeless shelter, because it was the only gig I can find, and it gave me a lot of freedom to travel, and eventually I'm now unemployed. And, so I probably could easily go back into marketing again. However, once you work and get people off the streets and see the real impact, I don't think I could sit behind a desk and make somebody else money, if that. So what people don't see is the amount of work. They don't see that, it's huge amount of hours of crunching video and out there, and it's emotional there. You get all these stories from people. There's a girl, Sabrina, she's 23, she's, got on heroin under a bridge over in Ballard, and she's still with me, and this is comfort food right here, so thank you, Domino's, for 6-cheese double bacon. But thank you for the question. Hopefully I answered that sincerely.
Anybody want to tweet Domino's and have one delivered? Right here.
Yeah. No, you have to stand up. Thanks. Hey, Mark, good to see you. The first time I met you with Chris Perillo was actually at the Whirl, Pelago.
Yeah, you were there at the beginning.
Yeah, I was there at the beginning.
Pelago, that's the name.
Yeah. So my question is, are you still in touch with the Pelago people, and have they continued to support you from that very first?
They all went when they sold the Groupon or whatever. I don't know what happened. I still am connection with Heather. So.
Heather Meeker?
Uh-huh.
I
actually looked. There's got to be photos from that event. Do you really? Could you email them to me? Because that's what I spent hours looking through hard drives and everything for that, and then I realized Whirl deleted all their stuff when they went to Groupon.
I want to say that I was there, and I may have some photos as well.
Well, you can say that.
Andrea, I want to say it. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but I want to say it. Andrea.
Okay, I might have missed this because I left to go use, anyway. You don't want to say that on a live stream. Anyway, is there a way, do you need, I know you just mentioned recently that you're going to have chapters and want to start chapters, but how does someone go about helping you? Because I already help another organization here, but they're kind of saturated with volunteers. They're very similar to what you do, but not exactly what you do. So how do we go about expanding your horizons?
Well, obviously donations. I wish I could hire one person, and that would be me. And then I wish I could hire somebody else, because I'm the kind of whirlwind crazy person, and I need somebody to file and do that bookkeeping and that kind of, executive director type stuff. But to answer your question frankly, right now we're not in the area that we can take volunteers. I just don't have the time to manage volunteers and interns, and I've tried. I desperately need some people that are creative and can help craft business plans and training materials. So are you familiar with DoSomething.org? It's a major youth organization. They've got research that says youth, the third most important cause to youth is homelessness. And I was just on Skid Row with USC's Homeless Club. Who would imagine that universities had social cause clubs? So it makes perfect sense to start merging and working with them to be able to create these local chapters, because we're really going to start focusing on youth and to make that all happen. So right now I really don't have capacity for volunteers. When we start doing local chapters, yes.
So you mentioned donations. Pardon the ignorant question, but is it something that we can donate to support your work and your travels and your storytelling at invisiblepeople.tv?
Yeah, the invisiblepeople.tv, there's donation stuff. I always recommend that you fight homelessness in your local community. So when you find somebody here in Seattle that's doing housing, jobs, and health services, housing, jobs, and health services.
What was that?
And housing, jobs, and health services.
All together now.
Housing, jobs, and health services. Housing, jobs, and health services. Because, you know, there's a lot of support ministries and outreach and stuff, and they're all needed. As long as the end goal is housing, jobs, and health services. It's okay to feed somebody in the park as long as you're getting them out of the park. So that's really important. Am I, yes?
Housing, jobs, health services.
Housing, jobs, and, you know, I don't know if you guys know this. Have you read $1 Million Murray? $1 Million Murray is written by Malcolm Gladwell. Tweet it out. It's an article in the New Yorker. We spent $1 million keeping Murray out on the street. So when you see these kids and these people out here, whether you're putting money in their cup or not, you're paying for them to be out homeless, and you're paying a lot of money. The most expensive solution to homelessness is criminalization. It's, you know, putting people in jails. It's actually increasing because it's a quick solution. We want them out of the park. We want them out of the mall. Let's arrest them. But you guys all pay for the cops, and you pay for the jails, and you pay for that. Most cost effective is get them into housing. Joseph, 13 years. Get them into housing. RD, get her into housing. Get them into housing. And if they can't work, then they need supportive services just to be able to maintain. And if they can work, then they need supportive services to get back into being a normal wage earner. So hopefully that makes sense.
I believe we have another question.
So Brian touched on this a little bit, but you mentioned passing a hat earlier, and I wonder if you brought a hat with you tonight that we could pass.
I think we can find a hat. Hold on. Chris, come here. Chris Perillo just seated the hat with $50. Which means, as an event producer, my job is to now find a hat. And fortunately, I have just the thing.
You got to put it on first.
I don't want Chris's $50 to. Well, you see, the idea is you take it and you pass it along. So we'll let that work the room while we get to the rest of the Q&A. Thank you for mentioning that. Certainly we hadn't planned that, but row 2, hello. They're digging into their wallets. Hold on, I'm gonna slide. Not that way. They told me not to stand there. I'm gonna have you come right here. When they say don't stand there and then I stand there, you know.
Thank you. Mark, you've shown us that social media can be really effective giving a face and a voice to people who need to be heard, but it also gives a face and a voice to people who are ignorant and say offensive things about homeless people. So I'm just wondering, since we know that you don't mince words sometimes, how do you react when you hear people making jokes about homelessness or putting homeless people down? Do you rise to it, or do you just kind of...
You have to pick your battles. So to me, you know, I hate when people say there's 2 types of people, there's 3 types of people. But to me, there's 3 types of people. There's people like you already work in homeless services. I know your story. So you already like homeless people. I'm not going to worry about you. I don't want to spend my energy on you. We've already got you. And then there's people that just, for whatever reason, are never going to change their mind, ever. So don't spend time on them either. But there's people that are on the fence, that whether it's an emotional connection or maybe reason, like, you know, $1 Million Murray reading an article like that, say, gosh, there are solutions. We can end homelessness and we can save money and lives. So those are the ones. But you brought up an interesting thing about social media. When I first started empowering homeless people on social media, I was like really nervous because I was like, what if they go and do this? And what if they go and do that? And then I realized there's a lot of assholes online that aren't homeless. You know what I mean? You know, there's people that are just jerks, you know? My friend Chris Perillo says, block.
Oh, I thought you were going to call him a jerk.
You know what I mean? So it's an interesting, if you can change somebody's paradigm, they can be your biggest evangelist. I don't have a lot of time to do this, but what I used to do a lot is I would search, set up searches for homeless, not the tag homeless. So I would get people that, hey, I just kicked a homeless person. And sometimes I would educate them, sometimes not so good, depending on emotion. But then there was like a girl that a homeless person stole their shoes. And I said, well, she was bitching about it. And I said, well, I'll send you some new ones. And then she started thinking about it. But the favorite was, and I do this in a different presentation. There's a mommy blogger in Salt Lake City. And she was just begging for it. So she says, you ever roll up a $5 bill into a paper airplane and throw it out the window at a homeless guy? She goes, I never have, but I want to. So I didn't engage her and say, you're, I said, tell me what street corner you're on, and I'll be there to catch the $5. And she responded great. She responded, she said, I'm not going to give $5 to somebody who's not following me. And that goes to the homeless person, too. I mean, it's, funny. I wasn't following her, I mean, I get it. It was funny. It was a good response. So then I sent her a link to Invisible People. And then she's like, oh, my gosh, are you a homeless guy? And you looked up them links, and, and then she freaked out. She went out and created a website called $5 Paper Airplane, where she takes a $5 bill and goes out and folds it up and gives it to a homeless person and tells their story. Now, she's a mom and she hasn't kept it up in a year or so. She got kids, I get that. But through that 5 minutes of interaction, zero marketing budget, I created an evangelist where she was going out and doing that story. So exactly what you said, there's some people out there that, hey, that's how they communicate. And if you can engage them and change their mind, you get a big evangelist. Hopefully that answered your question.
Did that answer your question? All right.
Okay,
Let's
Mike.
go grab another. I'm coming. Stand up.
You mentioned health services before, and I guess how would you suggest dealing with the stereotypes, dealing with the people who maybe aren't ready for help right now, those who are still really struggling with drug addiction and aren't ready for that home?
You're going to get me into a tangent, so start your stopwatches, okay?
Ready,
They
go.
say they're service resistant, but what it is we have so many roadblocks and so many barriers to be able to help them that most homeless people know, I go to this place, I go in, I got to sit there all day, and then maybe they'll help me, and if I do get in, I get a cot. Well, let me put it this way. No homeless person ever said, would you please put me in a room with 100 cots, give me one bathroom with 2 stalls, and then kick me out at 5 in the morning, every morning, even in the cold, and that's going to cure my drug addiction and mental illness. But that's what we do. I have a drawing of a homeless shelter in 1895 in New York City. And I have a color photo of a shelter in Los Angeles taken last year. They're identical except one's in color. So in 100 years, we're still warehousing people. So to directly answer your question, I see people out with extreme mental illness, extremely vulnerable. They're out on the street. My heart breaks because I know that there is not systems, health services, to be able to help them where they're at. See, one of the things that is different about homeless services than any other population is we don't listen to our clients. If Best Buy or Alaska Air or Hotel Max didn't listen to people, and just treated everybody, said, here's a sandwich, go to bed here, do that, you know what I mean? They'd be out of business. But we don't listen to the people to see what they really need to be able to help them. So I'll stop it there, but I believe everybody can be helped. We just are not meeting them where they at their terms. Does that make sense?
1 minute, 38 seconds.
Cool, not bad.
Not bad.
Because that's a big one to me. Is that I will, as a case manager, I will meet somebody that's out on the streets that's crapping in their pants and hasn't moved from the bus bench for months, and I'm not going to get them in the van to go to the facility to fill out paperwork. But if I was able to get his information and be able to say, here's a place for you with a shower and you can get better, and then sleep and rest, he'd do it. But they know all they're going to do is get bureaucracy. So.
I want to just say, Andrea, the first place I ever volunteered, I worked at Expedia at the time. First place I volunteered here in Seattle was at Northwest Harvest. I shoveled peas. They wanted to transfer me off to the next station, but I had so much fun shoveling peas. So it's sort of my like, how can I volunteer? How can I make a difference? I shoveled a lot of peas that day.
All right, Mark, so you made a lot of impact with capturing the stories with video. And we all could do that. In my experience, though, my limited experience, I've tried to get pictures and video, and there's like, no. There's a lot of shame, so it's really hard to capture that story. How do you get in there to share a story? I mean, to be approachable, I guess.
Yeah. It's a good question. But here's the thing. It's a human thing, not a homeless thing. Because I could go into, what is the mall down here, Pacific Center?
Sure, Pacific Place.
And I walk up to somebody and with my camera and they're going to go, oh, I don't have my makeup on. Oh. And then somebody else will go, I want to be on TV. You know what I mean? It's just a human thing. Exactly.
I'm the second one.
Yeah, I gathered that. You know, and you wouldn't wear the pot, though. To me, and what I do is I use socks to break the ice because everybody's, I mean, gosh, even the churches in Skid Row have asked other churches to stop bringing food. It's such a mess. It's just horrible. They're overfeeding. So everybody's giving food, so I give socks. Now, underwear is gold on the streets, but, you know, logistically, people come in lots of sizes, so underwear is hard to distribute. But socks are one size fit all, and you get this nonverbal, oh my gosh, he knows. I mean, I got a backpack of socks. Who else walks around with a camera and a backpack of socks? You know what I mean? So I'm not CNN and everything else. And I just open up that conversation. What's interesting and what's harder these days, especially in colder climates like Portland or Seattle, is who is homeless. 80% of my clients in LA that I work with when I worked in homeless services, you wouldn't even know that they're homeless. So everybody has a backpack now. Everybody's got a nice warm jacket. How do you know who is? So the socks actually helps me from embarrassing myself, because if they're not homeless, what are socks? Yeah. You know, but a homeless person would go, wow, I need socks, white gold. So, you know, I think if you just treat people with respect, you'll get that respect back. And I'm not media, so I never push it. The best stories are the ones I don't get. A girl told me at Nicholsville that her mom started selling her when she was 11 years old for methamphetamine. And I can't imagine that, but she wasn't going to tell me that on camera. You know, as a media guy, I wish, because it's very powerful and those are stories that need to be told. But in her personal space, she wasn't ready for it, so you never push it. Hopefully that helps.
Socks is your icebreaker. Next question. And we have time for just a couple more, and I also wanted to mention to the live stream, I am monitoring the live stream. If you have a question, pound SMC SEA, and I'll try to work them in here in the last couple of minutes. Carol.
Hi, my name is Carol, and Mark, thank you again for what you're doing to bring awareness in the first place. That's a number one, bringing awareness of this population that has thus far been invisible to most of us. Also, as a local nonprofit, and I will say that without shame, one of the most valuable things that you can do besides the social media part of it is to take the time. The person who is homeless doesn't usually have the resources or the energy. Their energy is spent trying to get into a shelter that night. Okay, take the time, handhold that person to their food stamp appointment, to their Social Security appointment, to their job training. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are programs out there, jobs training. Goodwill does a wonderful job. But if you took the hour or 2 or 3 or 4, we know how frustrated we get as a general population standing in line waiting for services. We get pissed off. Okay, do that all day, every day, and imagine the system has failed these people. One handhold, one mentor, a one-on-one makes a difference in a person's life.
Thank you, Carol. It's awesome.
I wanted to know, I'm sure many of us see lots of homeless people around Seattle. There's lots of people holding signs. I don't know how to ask this the right way, but, you know, a lot of us are desensitized to the homeless people. You know, it's pretty easy for me to completely ignore a homeless person when I walk across the street by Nordstrom or Pacific Place or on the corner by my house and not make eye contact. You know, sometimes I don't have any money on me and I'll give them a smile. And, you know, every once in a while when I do give $1 or do try to give something, once in a while it backlashes, which is kind of interesting. I tried to give somebody food a couple weeks ago and they said, no thanks. And I'm like, you're on the street, you don't want food. But anyway, what advice do you have for, you know, the normal person who's walking around downtown Seattle to, you know, interact or, you know, not be so desensitized when we see it all the time and might see the same 10 people around downtown Seattle?
You asked a couple of questions that I'm going to spin into the question that I want everybody to ask. Should we give homeless people money?
Okay.
I'm going to start off with something that you said. There's a friend of mine who high up in a nonprofit, and he came up to me frustrated, and he says, you know, I think it was over at Pike's Market. He said, I was buying something. I wanted gum, but they had a credit card limit, so I had to buy something else. So there was poppy seed bread next to it. So he brought a loaf of bread, you know, just because he had to meet the credit card limit. And then he walked out and he saw a homeless person and he wanted to give the bread to her and she wouldn't take it. And he says, it made me mad. And I said, well, maybe she's allergic to poppy seeds. Why do we try to force stuff we don't want on people out there? I mean, real homelessness is absence of choice. To directly answer your question, you know, I get busy. Sometimes I try to acknowledge people as human. So I will say, hi, how you doing? Obviously, you have to consider your safety first. When you're dealing with mental illness and drug addiction, the normal rules don't apply. So if you are going to give money, be careful you're pulling out your wallet. Homeless Services says, do not give money, because they want you to give money to them. And I agree with that if they're doing housing jobs and house services. But here's the thing, tampons, diapers, cold medicine, there's a lot of different things that social services, that only money can buy. I have a homeless friend, he tells it like this, he needed a toothbrush. He's in front of the drugstore, Walgreens, and he's got a sign, he says, I need a toothbrush. Well, people keep on bringing him a number 2 from McDonald's, a number 7 from Taco Bell. So he said, I had 4 or 5 Happy Meals at my feet, and they kept on bringing. He says, all I need is a damn toothbrush. You know what I mean? But I can't get that with the half-used hamburger, you know? I say it depends. You know, Sergey, the 18-year-old kid, I emptied my wallet. I mean, I was like, it's your 18th birthday, oh my gosh, and you know, I tried to help him find a youth shelter, but I gave him I gave him $40. Most of the time I don't. I just try to acknowledge, or I have socks. And again, I just try to acknowledge people. The other thing that I get is, he said he wanted a sandwich and he went and bought a beer. He lied to me. Enron. Okay, rich people have ripped off people a lot. You know, I've been ripped off a lot in my life, and it's usually from friends and family. It's not from homeless people. You know, these white-collar criminals or whatever, and there's a lot. I use Enron because everybody knows of it. They lie, you know, let's put it in perspective. So this guy's going to the bathroom behind a McDonald's dumpster every night. Let him have a beer. And now I've got 18 years sober. I'm saying let's put it in perspective. You know, the mommy blogger's hitting a bottle. The brother-in-law's hitting the pipe. You know, people do drugs. You know what I mean? When you're homeless, life sucks. It's nearly impossible to be homeless. So again, I'm not advocating that. But when I was homeless on the streets of Hollywood, if I didn't get dope, I would have gotten dope sick. And if I got dope sick, then I'd be vulnerable. And if I'm vulnerable, then I'm going to be bugged. So the people on Hollywood Boulevard that gave me money and I went and bought dope saved my life. You know, so if you give it out of a good spirit and you know, and again, it depends. I rarely give money, but so hopefully that answered your question. Don't feel bad if you're, you know, if you're busy or whatever, you don't feel safe and you don't acknowledge, don't feel bad. We're all human. I do it too. You know, one thing that drives me nuts is I speak at conferences and we all go walk out, and if there's a homeless person, everybody looks at me and I have to, can I get a day off? You know what I mean? You know? And I just mean that to make a little joke, is that, you know, we're all not superhuman people. At very best, we're all just struggling to take care of ourselves. So, you know, to be a realist, you might not have the energy, the time, or the resources to help that person. So don't feel bad. Good question. Thank you. I've been waiting for that one.
I believe we have one last question, Mark, and then there's something that we need to take care of, a little housekeeping. So if you guys want to stick around for just one more minute, we have a final question.
Hey, Mark, I was just curious if the men and women you've gotten off the street, once you get them off the street, does that, is it capable that their mental illness can be cured, or are they mentally ill for the rest of their life? How does that work out?
I'm glad you brought this up. In India, they believe people with schizophrenia talk to God. So they invite you in for dinner. 30% of people get better. In America, when you're schizophrenic, we say, here's an alley, eat out of dumpsters, and nobody gets better. So through tangible social interaction, and whether it be talking to your priest or talking to your bartender, you know, that's how people get better. And to answer your question directly, yes. As long as there's permanent supportive housing, if there's services. And that's where social media would play a big part in isolation. Because what happens is you take people that have lived for 4 or 5 years in a park, and now you put them in an apartment. That's pretty scary. And I've literally put people in the park. Thank God for you guys that support Invisible People, because I've worked as a worker, and I remember once putting 3 women into 3 different apartments. There was money for rent, but not money for a bed or curtains or anything else. And they were scared. So, you know, I tweet out, hey, I need some help, and you all help me don't get them beds, you know, so that we're able to do that. Or we put in people into apartments that have been on the streets for many years, and we say, okay, here's an apartment. We'll see you once a month for half an hour. You know what I mean? For the first 6 months, you have to be there every day. You have to be there, you know, she said, holding their hand. And in many ways, you have to do that. But they do get better. I mean, it's proven. If you go, again, to invisiblepeople.tv at home, there's a video with Sam from Pathways to Housing that talks about it, quite frankly, because he was working at Bellevue, and Bellevue is $1,500 a day, and they're bringing homeless people in, and then they're putting them back out of the hospital in 30 days. That's $45,000. Get them an apartment. And once they started getting an apartment, they saw them starting getting better. But you just don't put people in an apartment. You have to have supportive services. You know, the social interaction is so key. Cool, thank you, good question. All good questions. Thank you, guys. You're making me sweat.
I told you we were monitoring the Twitter feed. This came in for you, a special SMC bulletin.
Oh my gosh, Brian. Dang.
So this
the
actually...
guy that runs...
This is the LA Fire Department. I'm going to read it for those that may not be able to see it on the live stream. It says, our collective path forward in supporting invisible people was clarified today in the Emerald City at SMC Seattle by Hardly Normal. I think that deserves a round of applause.
Wow. That's really cool. Thank you.
And you know what else I think deserves a big round of applause? Every single one of you, because just like when it started in Seattle at Gnomedex and the hat was passed, Lisa Dawson made the suggestion tonight that we pass a hat. I found an odd-looking planter, and I think you might have seen a helmet that I don't know where our props people come up with these things. But because of you, I'm pleased to present Mark with an envelope. There's a serious chunk of change in this envelope. $600 from tonight's event to help the amazing work that Mark is doing with Invisible People.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris Perillo, for bringing him up here for Gnomedex and for kicking it off. Thank you so much, Mark.